Thank y'all. Thank y'all. Hey, before I get started, we're going to do something a little unusual for 11:20 in the morning. We're going to philosophize together. Before I get going, though, let me ask y'all a question. Who here, raise your hand if you were with me, what was it, about 6 years ago in Palm Beach, Florida? Raise your hand if you did philosophy. And that many of you, you didn't make your way to the exit right away when you heard my name. That's great. You remember how I started the session? Who here can name for me any of the great philosophers in human history? From where you sit, yell a name out, anybody. Oh, good. At Notre Dame, remember I had a policy. You give a good answer, you get a Snickers bar. Plato, I hear. Aristotle, I heard. Who else? Socrates. Who else? Sophocles. Who else? Oh, Confucius, Maimonides. My goodness, Maimonides, I've never heard in a public place. Who else? Oh, very good. Who? Your mother. Who else? Lao Tzu, very good. Who else? He said my name, he gets the rest of the bag. What do you think of that? Wait a minute. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, Maimonides, Confucius, what do they have in common? They're all dead. That's right. Doesn't look too good for me, does it? Where are the great philosophers now? Where are the great thinkers of the present day? You know what the answer might be to that question? You might be sitting next to one. Oh, skeptical faces from some of the rows all of a sudden. You guys, I'm not kidding. Everywhere I go, I see people turning to philosophy, the wisdom of the past, the timeless wisdom of the ages. Why all of a sudden in the last few years am I seeing this all over our country? Winston Churchill may have explained it when he said, you can always depend on Americans to do the right thing once they've exhausted every other possibility. Having tried everything else, people are turning to ancient wisdom. Today, in our short time together, we're going to talk about timeless wisdom and fresh perspectives for the sort of times of change we live in now. You know the old saying, when life hands you lemons, what are we supposed to make? Lemonade. And the great philosophers have taught us how. You know, I anticipated some of these philosophers you all might name, and I brought their pictures. Socrates, who used to wander the streets in Athens. And you know what he said? He was one of the first to popularize the saying, know thyself. You know what else he said? The unexamined life is not worth what? Living. He insisted that his fellow citizens examine their lives, examine their beliefs and their values, their hopes and dreams, their aspirations, their attitudes. He insisted they do so relentlessly on a daily basis. Of course, he insisted he drink poison and die, so it wasn't very popular at the time. Nonetheless, he was right. His famous student, Plato, said that in times of change, we must take our stand on unchanging principles. Plato was a championship wrestler, as well as one of the great intellectuals of all time. He believed that the unchanging must be our foundation for dealing with change. And you know, his great student Aristotle said amongst those unchanging things we need for this world of change are the virtues. The Greek meant strengths. Aristotle believed that of the virtues, the central virtue is that of courage. Without courage, no one, he said, can live a happy life. Without courage, no one can deal with change well. Well, as a man who taught at a Catholic university for 15 years, I couldn't just bring you pictures of Greek philosophers. I had to bring you one picture of a medieval Catholic philosopher, William of Ockham, viewed from a great distance. Appropriate because he was always having to run out of town, always having to leave town, getting in trouble with the Pope, with other people. He spoke his mind. He's the first person to appreciate the principle of simplicity. Ockham believed that in every situation, however apparently complex, there is a simple essence, a simple core. If we can master that core, we can deal with everything else. We're going to ask today a simple question. What wisdom do we have about change? What's the essence of change? And in order to set that up, I want to take you back to my first day of school. First grade. Ms. Anders' class, Durham, North Carolina, 1958. Now, I want to give you an idea of what happened that first day of class. This is my first time in a schoolroom in North Carolina in 1958. We didn't go to preschool. We didn't go to kindergarten. We ran up and down the road chasing dogs barefoot. I mean, this was a different time in history. I'm going to bring you right now the greatest piece of wisdom I ever got in the classroom. 6 years of elementary school, 6 years of middle school and high school, not 6 years of each, I was never held back, 6 years of all together, 6 years, 4 years of college, 6 years of graduate school, 15 years in classrooms at Notre Dame, and the single greatest piece of wisdom I ever heard was the first day of first grade. Maybe I just peaked early, I don't know, but this was an interesting time in the world. Remember, some of you may remember 1958. Nikita Khrushchev becomes premier of the Soviet Union. Elvis Presley joins the army. Jerry Lee Lewis marries his very, very young cousin, very scandalously. I discovered the concept of homework for the first time, and Connie Francis has the big hit song apparently entitled, Who's Sorry Now? It was an amazing time in our nation. It was an amazing time in world history and in my little life. I mean, I came into that first classroom, that first day of school. I sat in my little desk, and there stood Ms. Anders. She was a very beautiful teacher. She had a kind of a Jackie Kennedy thing going on. And as I sat there in my little desk, all of a sudden I had a sort of Jack Kennedy thing going on. I felt my first twinges of attraction. My beautiful teacher greeted us graciously and turned to the blackboard and wrote a sentence across the board. We had no idea why. None of us could read. But then she read it aloud, and I remember to this day what it said. She wrote the sentence and read it to us. Life is not what you want it to be. It is what you make it. Talk about hitting a bunch of 6-year-olds with an existential brick. I mean, that's just pretty heady for first day of first grade, isn't it? I mean, what's next? You know, class, tomorrow, Bobby's dad will come in and talk about his new book on death and despair. I mean, you know, no wonder I became a philosopher. It was all an effort to cope with first grade. We didn't get that deep. But Ms. Anders launched us on a path that I continue on to this day, the path of philosophy. Look at the word itself. It breaks down into 2 root words, philo, love of, sophia, wisdom. An object of love, when you lack it, you pursue it. When you have it, you embrace it. Philosophy is the pursuit and embracing of wisdom, insight for living. So our question is, what wisdom do we have about change?